Jeffries is a worldwide list and worldwide programming. So our focus on Italy and specifically Piemonte is growing at Jeffries as we're responding to what we're getting asked for. It's hard to keep these things on the shelf sometimes, to be honest. I hate to say that way, but we're seeing such a good increase in interest in Barolo and Barbaresco, specifically single crews, as people are looking for alternatives to Burgundy, frankly,
right?
Especially in Austin.
Hey y'all, I'm Jessica Dupuy, guest host for a special series on the Barolo and Barbaresco World Opening 2025, presented by Landmarks. This fourth edition of BBWO will showcase the latest releases of 2021 Barolo and 2022 Barbaresco wines from Piedmont and takes place in Austin, Texas on March 25th. Join me in the heart of Texas as we delve into the experiences and insights about the terroir of the Langhe region and its star grape variety, Nebbiolo. We'll talk to sommeliers and retailers from the key markets of Austin, Dallas, Houston, and beyond about the alluring wines of the Barolo and Barbaresco regions. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you rate your podcasts. Note, this series is funded by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the podcast participants only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or of the granting authority. Neither the European Union nor the granting authority can be held responsible for them.
All right, so Austin, Farina, welcome to Italian Wine Podcast. I'm so glad we were able to sit together and talk a little bit about Barolo and Barbaresco.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is one of my favorite regions, and I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yes, me too. So just so everybody knows, we are at Jeffries, which is a fine dining establishment here in Austin, Texas. One of my favorite places to come for special occasions. I think I was here for my anniversary recently. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about first yourself, and then we'll talk about Jeffries and kind of the MML group of restaurants. But where are you from, Austin, and how did you get into wine?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we are here in Jeffries, which is an amazing restaurant. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year as well.
Really?
Yeah, 1975 to 2025.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's a really exciting time to be here. I have been down here in Texas for 6 years now. Originally grew up in Virginia. My dad is Italian. He's was born in Milan. So I grew up first generation in Virginia. So my side of the family really drew me into the wine business. They weren't involved in wine, but always had an affinity for it, always had a love for it. My grandfather specifically had a love of collecting things that didn't really need to be collected and giving them way too much time in his cellar.
Oh, no. So you got to learn about oxidation quickly?
I got to learn what George Dubuff tasted like in the 80s. It was a weird time. But it was also had a huge love for Barolo and Barbaresco specifically, of course.
Yeah.
And so I moved down here about 6 years ago. I'm now the assistant wine director for MML Hospitality. So we operate quite a few restaurants now, mostly here in Austin, a hotel in New Orleans, an outpost in Houston, as well as a few small smattering of things up in Aspen and a new one, Clark's Oyster Bar in Montecito, California.
So Santa Barbara area.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I'm originally from Austin, and I have to say, the MML properties have kind of been like a fixture in my life since childhood. So Jeffries being a perfect example, like I mentioned, special occasions, birthdays, prom, I think, a long time ago. So it's really cool to kind of see that you've come from, not from Texas, but have found your way to this place and have made really an impact, particularly in the sommelier community in Austin. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the community here, and maybe Texas in general, just in terms of the vibrancy of such a great community that helps each other out to kind of further education in wine and kind of career trajectory, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Texas is such a big and diverse state, which is so exciting. It's bigger than France. So we have very different communities in the different parts of Texas, which I think is super unique. In Austin, the community is small, but really tight knit. Everybody is really helpful to each other. Everyone's really impactful. Everyone really kind of lifts each other up. And if you have a question, there's always somebody who has been there before and is ready to answer it. I've also spent some time in Houston, which we've talked about before, is I think the most exciting exciting place in the country to drink wine right now.
100%.
Yeah, an incredible community, an incredible market to work. It's a really, really fun time. And then, of course, Dallas, San Antonio, West Texas, they all have their own personalities too. Austin is a really fun place to be. It's a really dynamic place to be. It's still one of the fastest growing cities in the country, still one of the most fastest growing cities amongst kind of the new emerging wine drinking millennials now, as they start to shift into drinking a little bit more wine, and we start to see a few other people kind of coming up behind them. But yeah, it's a really exciting place to be right now.
Yeah, that's super cool. I wonder actually if you could talk a little bit about what you see in terms of Austin community compared to Houston community when it comes to wine. Like what is Houston wine scene like compared to Austin, and what have you seen? Is there a stronger desire for French or Italian or, things like that?
Yeah, I would say Houston is such a big city and such a diverse city that there's an affinity for just about everything, and there's a place for just about everything there. In Austin, I was surprised by the strength of the desire for Italian wine amongst general consumers in Austin.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I've been pleasantly surprised by that. When I first moved back from Houston, I was overseeing an almost 100% Italian list at Sammy's. Still oversee that kind of in more of a director way to the team there, which on the ground, which has really taken the reins and run with it. They've done an incredible job. Barolo and Barbaresco are two of the main features of the menu there, of course, but it spans Italy north to south, as well as some France, some other Mediterranean islands smattered in there as well, and some domestic stuff too for good measure.
Yeah.
But gotta get some Texas Fermentino on the list.
I love it.
But it's a fun place, and like I said, I think Austin has a lot more demand and a lot more affinity for Italian wine, and I think that speaks to kind of or more than I expected. I wouldn't say more than Houston.
Okay.
There's just more people there.
That's fair.
They got us beat on population.
By a lot.
But I think it speaks to the Austin kind of market's desire to like try new things and have new experiences, especially when it comes to food and wine as a unit. It's a really adventurous market, so hotter, newer, trendier things tend to take hold, and then in Austin and then spread, I think, elsewhere. Austin has that kind of cool factor, that X factor that kind of makes it outweigh even larger cities in the nearby area, like San Antonio, for example.
Exactly.
Much bigger city, but Austin's the one that people pay attention to. It has that X factor, and so it's a good place to be for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, you talked about how like there seems to be this great love, and of course, Sammy's Italian, being an Italian restaurant, right? They're going to obviously ask about Italian wines, but it's interesting to me just looking at that list in particular, the depth that you're able to bring for Barolo Barbaresco. And has that kind of been exciting in helping to build that list in terms of like, okay, here's what I'm seeing people want, and here's what we need to make sure we can offer. When you approach that kind of a list, are you looking for breadth of producer, depth of vintage, or how do you approach a list like at Sammy's, and maybe even compared to Jeffrey's, because I know it's quite a bit different and still offers a lot of Italian wine as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So Jeffrey's is a worldwide list and worldwide programming. So our focus on Italy and specifically Piemonte is growing at Jeffrey's as we're responding to what we're getting asked for. It's harder to keep these things on the shelf sometimes, to be honest. I hate to say that way, but like we're seeing such a good increase in interest in Barolo and Barbaresco, specifically single cruise, as people are looking for alternatives to Burgundy, frankly.
Right.
Especially in Austin. I can't speak to if Houston's seeing the same thing right now, but suffice to say they probably are.
Yeah.
It's probably not just an Austin, Houston thing either.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But so yeah, we are at Jeffrey's. The list is smaller of Piemontese wines because the overarching programming is bigger. Whereas at Sammy's, it's more of a microscope. The server, and it reflects in the servers there too. At Jeffrey's, we have incredibly knowledgeable sommeliers, and they're on the floor every night. At Sammy's, the servers can tell you the difference between La Mora and Castiglione Filetto.
It's pretty awesome.
They can talk to you about Treso versus Nieve. Like it's an incredible thing that they've been able to build, as like they're able to go from a big bird's eye view like Jeffrey's has into a little bit more narrowed focus over at Sammy's. The list there is still big. It's still about 500 wines, but again, mostly Italian, and the biggest focus is Piemonte. And so Jeffrey's, it's more about, okay, we're seeing this trend popping up at Sammy's and people being excited about it. How do we expand our offerings here, make sure we're getting a good stylistic diversity in Piemonte, make sure we're capturing those entry tier folks who have, maybe never heard of Langhe Nebbiolo, maybe they can graduate from there to a Barolo or Barbaresco. Then they can start to explore single cruise. Then they can keep going from there. But it's all about taking that first step in that first journey. So how do we make sure that in a smaller list, we still hit all those steps of that journey?
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's a really good way to look at it. I think that's really helpful. Tell me about your kind of personal experiences with the two regions, Barolo and Barbaresco. Have you had a chance to ever go, or?
Yeah, so I have been a handful of times to Barolo and Barbaresco, the area right around the Langhe and Alba and Asti. And so it's an incredible place. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
Oh.
It's one of my favorite cuisines in the world as well. I think Barolo and Barbaresco and the cuisine of Piemonte, specifically the cuisine of the Langhe and the cuisine of Monferrato, are so unique and kind of capture this really beautiful synchronicity between the French love of food and ingredients and like putting the highest the highest importance on just good quality ingredients and technique, and the Italian ideas that were similar but maybe a little bit more driven from heart and soul and just feel of it.
Love it. That's a great, they
so
really
Piemonte
do come
does
together.
both.
It comes together like that.
Yeah, it's such an incredible place. And so, we have a really incredible love and respect for Piemonte, both at Sammy's and Jeffrey's, but it doesn't just go to the wines. It's the cuisine, it's the culture, it's the people, it's the art, it's everything that kind of comes from it. Going to Barolo and Barbaresco a handful of times has been, a mountaintop journey for me, for sure. Really? And I hope to continue to be able to do it. The towns are incredible, the winding streets, the wine, of course, the fog, actually being able to see it roll through, being able to look down the valley from the Cruscarone and see all the way down to Serralunga d'Alba and some of the single vineyards and single cruise kind of sticking out from the ridgeline. It's an incredible place, and I highly, highly, highly encourage anyone to go. It's super tourist friendly. It's really easy to get around. There's a lot of cycling if you're into cycling. I know a lot of folks here in Central Texas are.
Yeah.
It's an incredible place to do a cycling trip. Yeah, it's a wonderful. I love Barolo and Barbaresco.
If we're pushing things for people to do, I also think it's amazing to go ahead and take advantage of the truffle dog hunting if you're in there at the right season, because to have an expert guide and show you how these dogs are trained to go and find like things deep in the dirt is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this, but like I knew about, there's truffle hunting in like France, but they tend to use pigs, whereas in Piemonte, especially, there's a particular breed of dog. It is specifically trained to do the truffle hunting. And, for anyone who's not had fresh shavings of a white truffle on Taillorine, I mean, I know we're supposed to be talking about the wine, but we'll get to that. No, I'm kidding. But it's pretty amazing with, Nebbiolo, right? So whether that's from Barbaresco or Barolo, maybe talk to me a little bit about what is it to you with the Nebbiolo grape that captures something that's beyond?
I love the conversation circling around food and wine here because that's what it is, right? And I think that's what we need to kind of refocus a little bit in America is like having a meal in Piemonte without wine is like having a meal without a fork. Like you just you don't, it's something you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And in America, we are still kind of figuring that out, I think. And so maybe that's our next harebrained scheme is to convince everyone that wine is part of dinner.
It seems like an obvious, but maybe you and I are in the industry that, yeah.
So Nebbiolo specifically, really incredible grape variety, really terroir transparent, long growing season, which I love in wines always. I always seek out vintages where, the growing season was a little cooler, a little longer, a little bit more even, because for me, I feel that it gives the grapes the opportunity to develop complexity of flavors without their alcohol shooting through the roof or their acidity falling off, right? So Nebbiolo is already kind of built for that inherently, which is part of the reason why it hasn't really propagated around the rest of the world the way that Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir has.
Okay.
It's indigenous to this place, and it's molded itself to this place specifically.
Yeah.
And so it's so unique. It needs such specific climatic conditions through the season that just like truffles, you really can't do it elsewhere. It just doesn't work in that way. Very few. There's some exceptions where Nebbiolo has gotten out there and done really well. But again, there are places where it's very specifically has a very long availability of their season.
Right. Tell me what you expect between Barbaresco and Barolo? We don't have to drill too deep into like specific. I mean, unless you want to, but like, what do you expect from Barbaresco? What do you expect from Barolo when you're drinking those wines, and kind of where do they shine in their own way?
Yeah. So I think this is such a fun topic because it addresses what I think is probably the biggest misconception in Piemonte today.
Wonderful.
Is that there's not that much of a difference between Barbaresco and Barolo unless you're tasting them side by side and you are really adept at tasting wine.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people, consumers who have heard of Barolo and Barbaresco and understand that there's a difference between the two, would think that Barbaresco is lighter.
Okay.
Because historically, and I'm talking 50 years ago plus, that was the case, right? But as winemaking has improved, as farming has improved, as climate's been changing a bit, for both of the regions, the bar has drastically narrowed.
Okay.
Or the gap is drastically narrowed, I should say. And so the wines and the quality, the kind of richness in body, the aromatic structures, there's almost an indistinguishable difference between the two. Now, I think we can definitely drill down to individual sites and individual crus. Like I said, Nebbiolo, kind of like Pinot Noir or Nerello Mascalese or Grenache can be sometimes, is a really terroir transparent grape. And so I think that's where, for me, you see a lot. I would say there's a lot more difference between La Mora and Serralunga d'Alba than there is between a Barolo that's regionally appellated and blended from a few different parcels, or a Barbaresco that's regionally appellated and blended from a few different parcels.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to say it. Let's talk on two levels here, because I think that it's important to mention the depth of education that you guys really kind of promote here through MML. You guys do regular weekly, I think, classes for staff that can include everyone from your floor sommeliers to dishwashers, right? Like if you want to learn about wine, you can come and show up at these things. How do you approach the education angle for your staff to be able to explain Barolo and Barbaresco? As you said, like at Sammy's, everyone can talk about it with great knowledge. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it's a lot of constant gentle pressure.
Okay.
It's a lot of kind of pushing a little bit every day, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you come out and hit somebody over the head with questions that they don't even know what the words mean, then you're not really going to get a good response from them in terms of learning and pushing themselves. But we do put a lot of emphasis on education, a lot of emphasis on tasting. And again, with those weekly classes and others, it's about pushing somebody a little bit further every time and pushing a little bit more towards the direction you want them to move into. And so, yeah, we do a lot of education here. We feature producers from around the world. We focus on different import books, different domestic producers, grape varieties, kind of regional themes. We did a really great class on alpine wines last year. It was really fun.
Nice.
Kind of focusing on those alpine and subalpine regions around the world. So some high altitude Nebbiolo included in that conversation, which was fun.
Valtellina?
Yeah, I think we did Valtellina that day.
Yeah.
Nobody else dries the Nebbiolo out like they do. So it's an interesting,
it's true.
It's an interesting flavor profile.
Yeah.
But it works for them. And so the regions of Barolo and Barbaresco, while they're not necessarily alpine wines, they do see that influence of the cooler climate, the longer season, and those things as well. But having the emphasis for our staff being on education about these regions and about the micro regions within them, the villages and the crus, really kind of drives the narrative. Then I think that infects other places and other regions, because you can see that same effect of, it's concept of terroir, right? In action. And you can see that same effect in Burgundy. You can see the same effect in Austria. You can see that same effect starting to emerge in Germany and in other parts of the wine world as well. And Barolos and Barbaresco really jumped on it pretty quickly and realized that they're terroir transparent grape varieties that can do really well when you look at them on an even more micro level.
Okay. That's super helpful. How does that translate to the guest? When you're, let's say Sammy's, for instance, where it's an Italian driven menu, you probably have, this is the case with all guests. It's like, sometimes you just order what you know. So, it's like, oh, I love Barolo or I love Barbaresco. I'm going to stick in my little safe place with these producers that I know. Kind of what's the approach on expanding their horizons and giving them something to discover?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love all these questions today. So
I'm sorry.
So
what I do.
A lot of when we talk about at Sammy's specifically, and at Jeffrey's too, but specifically at Sammy's when it refers to Italian wine, is the kind of transition that Italian wine has had since like the 70s and 80s into now.
Yeah.
And kind of that from a historical context. So starting with like the staunch traditionalist winemakers and the folks who have kind of maintained that kind of staunch traditionalism into the quote modernism of using some more French techniques, using French barriques, shorter fermentations, more aggressive extraction, all of these things. And what is that flavor profile? And the folks that are still using those techniques, some have pulled back a bit, some have continued to stay exactly where they are. And, where does that add more diversity into how we write the list? Where does it add more diversity into how we talk about it to guests and make recommendations? If you typically drink Napa Cabernet and your friend told you should try Barolo, it's helpful for me to know that you typically drink Napa Cabernet so that I can steer you towards somebody who also uses Barrique and who uses some Machoke. There's not a right or wrong way. They're just totally different flavor profiles. And we want to make sure that from a service perspective, that some people get what they want.
Yeah.
And now I think the most interesting part of Barolo is what I've kind of been calling and Barbaresco, I've been calling kind of postmodernism.
Tell me. Yeah.
So
how would you define that actually? Because that's a really...
So these are folks who are utilizing the technology and the kind of some of the beneficial parts of the kind of modernism movement, but pulling back to large botti, pulling back to longer macerations, kind of pulling back some of the things that made Barolo, but then keeping some of the things that made Barolo into something that you don't need to wait 30 years to be able to truly enjoy, or at least the perception of it, right? And I think it's similar, honestly, to what happened to Burgundy back in the 70s and 80s. Burgundy, people forget, was also something that you had to wait quite some time to be able to really enjoy a Grand Cru. And in that time, we saw a lot of kind of, quote, modernizing right around the same time as Barolo and Barbaresco did. And you started to see wines that were a lot more plush and a lot more open in their youth and a lot more ready to enjoy. And I think that's Barolo and Barbaresco are really starting to emerge from that same era into things that I can drink a 2020 or a 2021 Barolo and get immediate pleasure out of it. I don't need to wait so long. And so they took some of these good things from this kind of modernism movement and then peeled back the stuff that they didn't want anymore.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay.
And the best part of it,
yes,
it's all being led by women.
I love this too. Yeah.
Yeah. Not all, but a lot of the greatest houses of Barolo and Barbaresco are being taken over by the daughters of the founders or the daughters of the people who took the ownership from just making grapes to making wine and kind of founded the label into these things. So there's a ton of them. I would spend way too long listing specific people, but it's there. I think the wines have never been better.
Yeah. I mean, that transition to the next gen, is always an interesting thing to see. And I think you're right. You do see a lot more women wanting to kind of really dig into and take on a family tradition in this way. It's something I heard the other day, and I feel like it's appropriate to quote who it was from, just because it was something I'd never heard of when it comes to the Barolo Barbaresco region and the discussion of traditional versus modern, right? Like we should probably just move away from that in general because it creates so much tension. But I heard this from Giuseppe Vira, who was talking about how you also have to think about that those two factions also had other things going on that we don't think about. So like the issue of cleanliness really came alongside with the whole modernist movement because they were using new barrels, not old barrels that had probably been used so many times, right? And they were using new things that were just by virtue of the fact that it was new going to be clean, right? And something he said that struck me is that really like running water did not make it to Piemonte until the 70s, early 80s.
Certainly not into the cellars.
Exactly, because they were underground and it was like you had wells that you had to pump the water to, and like if you already had to fill your kitchen sink to clean dishes and bathe and everything else, like were you really going to pump that much water to get down to your cellar to clean everything? And so that was such a huge revelation to me because it's not necessarily about the intent of the winemaking. It was a byproduct of what the resources were or were not. And so this idea of, like you said, people are kind of going back to traditionalist ways in terms of larger vessels, but with more modern advanced techniques because we have water pressure, heat, from the water, all of these things.
Better understanding of
Yeah.
microbes.
Yeah. So, I mean, he used the term like clean traditionalist. And I really liked that idea because these are the parts that we hear buzzwords about these things, but I think there's so much more that we have to consider. And it was really helpful to me to understand that better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is such an interesting phenomenon. I experienced it during a trip to Barbaresco and Barolo on the same day. We went from the cellar of a very well-known, kind of arguably the founder of modernism in Barolo and largely in Italy, which is a very like pristine, shiny, elegant thing.
Yeah.
And amazing in that right. And then to one of the most sought after traditionalist winemakers right after.
Yeah.
And saw the damn cellar and saw the mountains of iconic bottles displayed amongst the botti, and to see those two so starkly contrasted in within an hour of each other was such a unique thing. But I think many of these wineries, whether they kind of went into the more of the modernist route or whether they stuck into the more of the traditionalist route, these families are now coming back towards the center in both ways, most people, and are taking some of those better things like we were talking about, the cleanliness, temperature controls in some instances, winemaking advancements that came with the quote modernist movement. But then wait, did we lose something when we or what do we want to keep from our kind of history and our tradition in terms of what makes Barolo Barolo, what makes Barbaresco Barbaresco, making sure we don't lose those things in the pursuit of a style.
Right. And, to kind of like sum all of that up, I think this is what inspires me about what we do in wine is like, you're able to take all of that experience, see those two different contrasts in one day, and then you have to boil that down and present that to a guest as they're asking you what bottle of wine that they should drink that night.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the beauty of the exchange, right? Of what we're doing.
Right. The biggest question that I ask guests, especially at Sammy's and especially when you're looking at Barolo and Barbaresco, is, are you searching for something that's more driven by elegance or more driven by power? And those two things are not mutually exclusive at all. It's just which one is winning a little bit more in that fight.
No,
and there are answers. There are a handful of wineries in the world where those things are both equally matched and both equally turned all the way up.
Yeah.
And those things are some of the, those wineries are some of the best examples of each of their respective regions. But generally, I'd say most wines fall into one or the other is going to win out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So it's more steering towards, okay, is someone drinking classically Napa Cabernet or Bordeaux and wants to try Barolo,
right?
Where am I going to take that person versus somebody who typically drinks Burgundy and Riesling and Etna and things like that, and taking them into Barolo? Where am I going to end up with both of those different clients? And I think that's kind of the unique thing for Barolo and Barbaresco is that you do have both because of this history, because of this trajectory, because of this kind of split between traditional and modern and the kind of convergence of it. And because of the kind of unique aspect and the unique characteristic of the Nebbiolo grape.
Right.
We talked about it a little bit with food pairing, but it's such a unique thing to be able to have something that has really high tannin and really high acid.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's drying your mouth out with the tannin. It's replenishing the water with acid at the same time.
It's making you want more with that and also to eat. So much so that you oftentimes don't notice the alcohol that also happens to be a little bit elevated, but that's okay.
All the things. All the way up.
Exactly. Everything's turned to 11. All right. So I have one last question for you. And that's just, we're sitting here today to talk about Barolo Barbaresco in kind of like anticipation of the BBWO, so Barolo Barbaresco World Open. And I'm just curious, for someone like you who's in charge of multiple different wine programs and you have an opportunity, obviously you've been able to travel to the regions, but then in a situation like this, you have an opportunity to see 150 producers in one place. How do you go about navigating an experience like that as someone from the trade? What are you most looking to do at something like this? Are you trying to discover something new? Or are you trying to make relationships with people you already have?
Yeah, it's a both and for sure, because we have a lot of interest in Barolo and Barbaresco, both from the trade level as well as the consumer level right now.
Yeah.
I tell folks all the time, when I'm kind of moving them from one part of the world into something from Piemonte for their dinner, this is the best time to discover Barolo and Barbaresco for all the reasons we just discussed. You don't need to wait forever for it to be ready in your cellar. The wines are increasingly, delicious upon release every year after year. Yeah. We also are going through a string of really incredible vintages, which shows no signs of slowing down.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Some really incredible vintages that are some, even you can still find some 16s and 15s in the market still occasionally. 18s are so delicious and ready to go right now. 19s are amazing. 20s are being released right now, are incredible and ready to go right out of the gate. Like, these ones are really spectacular. And especially if you're looking for terroir transparent grapes, you probably also like things like Burgundy and things like Riesling and things that are, that are catching on already or have caught on already. And maybe you're looking for what's the next thing I can go to that's a little bit different, but still gives me that pleasurability of like, oh, this single vineyard is different and unique and fun.
Right.
And gives me a really delicious flavor profile that can hit all of the things that I was already looking for. I just didn't know I could find here.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So within the context of the event itself, we're always looking for who's here for an event that is either excited about getting into the United States if they're not already, excited about getting into Texas if they're not already. With Texas, of course, we have the advantage of a few massive ports. So we do have a lot of kind of smaller independent folks who are able to find their way in via connecting with other smaller independent folks who are here.
Yeah.
Which is a great boon for our market here specifically. But beyond that, I think it's so important to continually build and develop relationships with folks that you already have, especially because you never know what shifts are going to happen. You never know what positions you might find yourself in or where you might find yourself, geographically, and you might need to lean on somebody, a relationship you had with somebody that you didn't know you needed at the time.
Yeah. So it's a balance of all of it.
Absolutely. So like, I'm so excited to connect with people that I've met before and some of my favorites, as well as to meet, new friends and people. We're doing a small breakout session and tasting at Jeffrey's here during the World Open, I think on February 5th.
Yes.
As well as a few other events happening around town. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'll be great. Well, Austin, it's always great to sit down with you. I feel like you're really good at packing all sorts of amazing information into a short amount of time.
Thank you. And you're so good at editing.
Well, it's a good team. It's a good team mix. But thank you so much for taking this time. I know you're super busy right now, and I look forward to seeing you definitely at the masterclass. I will be there. And then also at the big event in March.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this special series on the Barolo and Barbaresco World Opening 2025. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Special note, this series is funded by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the podcast participants only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or of the granting authority. Neither the European Union nor the granting authority can be held responsible for them.